All right, what's up, y'all? It's Will here at Schedulefly, and I'm excited to have Patrick Woodson on the phone today. Patrick and I have not spoken before. I have had his business partner Van Nolentha on the podcast, and these guys have got an amazing, very memorable, unique place called Brewery Bhavana in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's unlike anything you've ever seen, and Patrick and I will talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, but it is just phenomenal, and if you go there once, you'll never forget being there for all sorts of reasons. But Patrick, thank you for taking the time to do this today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on and the kind words about the spot.
Oh, man. It's a tremendous place. Well, first of all, so Patrick has a young child who he has just gotten down for a nap. So if you get, if things go awry and you get the early wake up call, it's all good, man. Let me know. We won't make this too long. But now Brewery Bhavana, okay, y'all, you've got this place that's you've got a brewery, you have a flower shop, you have books, and then you have a dim sum restaurant all in there, and this amazing, naturally lit, just incredible place. The design is just off the charts phenomenal, and the beer is absolutely off the charts phenomenal too. Now, you don't actually brew the beer there, though, do you? Is that right, on site?
Yeah, that's correct. That's actually one of the most common questions because we have 20 beers available all year round, and then on top of that, there's a lot of reserved vintage bottles. So we produce quite a bit of beer, and people always walk in, and it's a large space as is. I think we have 206 seats total.
Yeah.
But with the amount of food that we send out, a huge portion of that building is dedicated to the kitchen. So people, oftentimes guests will come in and they'll start doing the math, and they're like, "How in the world are you brewing all this here?" No. So we have actually just about a mile and a half down the road, a space that grew from about 8,000 square feet to now 30,000 square feet.
30?
And yeah,
oh my God,
it's quite large. I never would have dreamt we would be at this stage now. But we produce everything down the road. I've got a team of about 8 on the brew staff, and we also, one of the reasons it's so large is we have a massive barrel program, or possibly I'm never sure where the numbers lie, but I'm pretty certain we're the largest independently owned barrel program in North Carolina.
Really? Okay, so you went from 8,000 to 30. Now, bearing in mind, this has only been a few years that you've been open, correct?
Yeah, we would have just celebrated our 3rd anniversary at the end of March.
Oh, wow. What? Okay. First, I need to come see the actual brewery sometime if you'll let me. But explain the layout there. Was this a building that y'all bought and you only needed 8,000, or did you build onto it, or what's the?
Yeah, it's interesting because our sister restaurant, who Van and Van Visa, my business partners, own, Vita Mondo, which is a wonderful restaurant right next door to Bhavana. And so we were very fortunate that 218 South Blunt Street, which is where the restaurant is located, became available. And Pete, the landlord there, who formerly ran Tiernanog, which was an Irish pub that had been there for 25 years, really wanted to make sure it went to somebody local, and he knew we were working on our project, so he came to us. So we couldn't have been more excited about that space. And the original plan was to put the brewery in there because it itself is about 8,000 square feet.
It's big. Yeah.
And just serendipitously, we got a call at the same time from another good friend of ours who had acquired a bunch of warehouse spaces down the road. And, we we went from trying to create a small brew pub to building a production brewery and a large restaurant all at the same time, which in a lot of ways became a calculated decision, because brew pubs themselves, their biggest bottleneck is if they start to outgrow, they need to build a second space. So we just kind of were crazy and swung for the fences, which is in a lot of ways what opened up the opportunity for us to really think about what else we could do with the restaurant space to fill the vast quantity of space we had there, which I think fortunately the Raleigh community as a whole, there's so many creative folks in and around our lives that it became real easy to start thinking about, okay, well, maybe we'll have a flower shop and bring our good friend Dina in. Maybe we'll create a library and start selling books, and so it just kind of snowballed from there. And I always like to point out that there was never a meeting where we sat down and had a drew up a business plan that was like, it would be a great concept: Chinese food, Belgian wood-aged beer, flowers, and books. So it just kind of all evolved because of the creative folks that are around us. So that's why it seems like such an odd combination, but fortunately it has worked out, and the greater Raleigh and North Carolina scene has been very welcoming and from day one, and really I think has shown a lot of love for us, which we're very grateful for.
Well, I have to say, several years ago, when Van first told me what y'all were doing, and it had gotten to that point, because he was all for those things, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I haven't owned a restaurant, but I just thought, wow, okay, well, it's going to be interesting. I bet you got a lot of that. But what's so interesting is that's the thing about the creative process. When you come up with something unique, there's no precedent for that. So you don't have anything to base it on. So you're just kind of with this cognitive dissonance of going, how in the heck does all that go together? But folks, if you're listening to this, I highly encourage you, go to brewerybhavana.com, BHAVANA, brewerybhavana.com. You'll see pictures of the space there. It is incredible, and it's beautiful, and it works. Like you hear those things, you're like, books and flat, like it's so disparate. Like, how does that work? Boy, these guys figured out how to make it work, and make it work really well, to the point that, within like a year or so of y'all opening, if I'm not mistaken, Forbes named Brewery Bhavana one of the top 10 hospitality places to visit in the world, and for good reason. And it's almost like I would imagine people come from all over that have heard about Brewery Bhavana at this point.
Yeah, it's that came out of nowhere for us, and I think a lot of folks, a lot of restaurants have PR teams, but our crew is really, it's just Van Visa and I and our wonderful staff, and that we really had no clue that was coming our way, and it's still to this day, it's pretty mind-boggling to me, and I think it definitely has resulted in a lot of folks coming from all over the world that happen to be passing through the Triangle, which is always really fun. I think our staff is just phenomenal too, and the hospitality piece. We hear so many great stories from their perspective of the folks that they meet that are like, well, I read this, and so I had to come, which is really fascinating. But again, super surprised that happened, but incredibly grateful the results from it.
Well, it's one of those things that, and I know this isn't y'all's plan, but you could, with the right people in the right city, with the right intention. That concept is now something you've proven that works. You or somebody else could do something like that in a dense, densely populated, big city, in almost anywhere, because it works so well. And plus, I mean, let's face it, you've got every part of it is tremendous, from the hospitality to the design. Your team of people is phenomenal. Your food is fantastic, and your beer, which is where you come in, man. So tell me about your beer, because I've had multiple different kinds of your beer, and I've always it's good. So, what do you come to the beer process with, and what's your overall philosophy, I guess, about beer?
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for the kind words. So I came to brewing by accident. I, like any good college student, enjoyed my beer, but
Yeah.
I think pretty early on, I dove deep into the craft beer scene, which we're talking back in the early 2000s. And growing up, my dad was a botanist, and he homebrewed occasionally. So I like to tell the story of me turning 21, and I happened to be home from college on break at that point, and he's like, "All right, I'm going to teach you to brew, because you got to stop stealing my beer." And so he gave me a crash course in his method, and then I wound up going to grad school for fermentation sciences and biology, really focused on biofuel production. But I spent a lot of time throughout college and grad school working in the hospitality industry on the restaurant side. But then I slowly started brewing more and more at home. So over the course of 10 years, I really kind of approached home brewing from a very methodical, scientific standpoint, and and really fell in love with the process and the interesting kind of duality of science and art that exists within it. Yeah. Especially when you start talking about wood aging beer, that so we do a lot of Belgian inspired beers, as well as hoppy new American IPA styles. But the thing that I think I'm most passionate about in brewing is really the mystery of sticking beers into old wine barrels and letting them spend 6 months to a couple years, and adding good bacteria to them that kind of, for me, blurs the line between the science portion of it, which, sure, creating a recipe is a creative process, and making a beer, the typical way in stainless steel. But then once you release it into barrels, you're kind of taking it back to the wild. And then for me, that becomes more about the palate of myself and what I hope to get out of beer, because you're not just taking one batch of beer and sticking it in a barrel, you're sticking it in. We have over 300 barrels and fooders, which are these massive, massive barrels. And I love the aspect of tasting different things, seeing where they're at, and blending them, and thinking, almost like a chef does this need more acidity? Does this need more fruit? Does this need to be dry hopped? So in a lot of ways, that's more attuned or akin to a winemaker when you blend than brewing per se. But in terms of my philosophy, I think the main thing I'm always striving for is subtlety and nuance. And a lot of that's derived from kind of the sensory overload that Bhavana is. It's a lot to take in. There's 20-some beers, and the bookstore, flower shop, and then our food. Our chef is amazing, and our executive chef Lon's phenomenal. But then our dim sum sous chef is just amazing too. And a lot of the cuisine itself is very specific to small amounts of ingredients and repetition in terms of creating dim sum. There's not a lot of overpowering flavors, and I mean that in a good way. So for me, brewing, thinking about people coming in and experiencing all that is Bhavana, I want them to be able to taste a lot of the different foods, taste a lot of the different beers, and walk away from the table not having their palate like completely overwhelmed. And so a lot of that influences the amount of ingredients we're using, the type of flavor profiles, and how those balance well with the type of food we create. And I think that does certainly exist in the brewing world, but a lot of the American tradition of brewing is like, how can we put more hops in it? How can we get more fruit in it?
Yeah.
How can we make it more aggressive? And that's not really my wheelhouse.
Gotcha, man. Okay. This is awesome.
That's certainly not to say that that's a wrong brewing approach from other people's perspective. It's just not what I personally am striving for.
Sure. And everybody, that's right. And there is no right or wrong. It's what works for you and what drives you. So, well, you've created a great harmony there. That's for sure. With all that stuff, it is a lot. There's a lot to take in, but y'all balance it so well. So what's going on now? Because the restaurants close. If I'm correct, y'all are not doing the takeout or curbside there, so you aren't selling any beer off of those 20 different taps right now. Do you sell a lot to other restaurants and to grocery stores?
Yeah, I mean, we all know it's a weird, tough time for private or independently owned restaurants and breweries the same. We fortunately, early on we focused very much on the restaurant experience itself, and we're not really doing packaged beer. And a lot of that, speaks to the style that I was brewing, that I really wanted the beer to be experienced in the space itself with our food. As we grew, we really took a slow kind of growth path to packaging, so getting into cans and then also bottling a lot of these wood aged beers that we do that take years to make. And only in the last probably year or so did we really focus on scaling and getting into some of the grocery store chains. We've always been available kind of on a limited volume at restaurants and bars and bottle shops. Raleigh and the Greater Triangle has such a phenomenal restaurant scene, and all of us, for better or worse, even though we're competitors, we're all very close with each other. And so fortunately, we just have so many friends that have supported us, and we don't really go out there and fight for tap handles, which some breweries have to do, but we also are not looking at that as a huge growth market for us. I will say that right now, in our current circumstance, I'm very glad that we pursued several grocery store chains in the last 6 months before all of this happened, and we've seen huge growth in the last month or so with sales through places like Whole Foods and Lowe's and Wegmans. And then, I mean, it's bizarre to me, but we've even gotten calls from like Walmart and Food Lion, which is not to say anything against those places, but I never would have imagined a world where Bhavana beer would sell in a Walmart, and also never imagined that we'd be getting calls from the buyers there as opposed to sending a sales rep to try and convince them, which I think also speaks volumes about the greater community. All of those grocery store chains realize that they're some of the only places that a lot of these local breweries can sell, so they've really gone out of their way to make sure that they're buying from all the folks around here, which has been a huge help. I think it's what's hopefully going to get us all through this process.
Well, you would look. I would not have guessed that Walmart would call you, but then again, I'm not that surprised. They run a good operation. They're efficient, and they probably, I'm assuming it would be on a regional basis or something like that. But I mean, look, if you're them or Harris Teeter or Wegmans or whoever, and you're sitting there thinking, gosh, all these brands that people can't access right now, like Brewery Bhavana, and all the other ones they love in this area, if we get it on the shelves, that's a win for y'all. It's certainly a win for them, and get more people coming in and buy. You go buy a 12-pack or a 4-pack or 6-pack of Brewery Bhavana, you're going to wind up buying some other stuff too. So I'm glad to hear that, man. And I'm not surprised. How do those conversations go? Like, how do you decide whether to go put your beer in Walmart temporarily or long term? Like, what goes into that?
That's a really interesting question, particularly in this moment in time, because, I mean, and again, I'm not speaking disparagingly about any of these big different grocery chains. It's just, there's definitely, very different demographics that shop at certain places. Yeah. And a lot of the things we do, because of the ingredients we use and because of the methods, cost quite a bit more to produce. And that can be reflected, in the final product. So, there's certain, like a Whole Foods, somebody buying beer at Whole Foods is generally very different in terms of their buying power than a different grocery chain, for instance. So we used to think about that very much in terms of making sure that we didn't wind up with products sitting on shelves, just getting old. But now the tables have really flipped, and there's a lot of people in this pandemic that are drinking a lot of beer at home.
I'm one of them.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. But so it really, at this point, we're pretty open to selling to anybody. We just, in the past, it's not like we were excluding anyone, but we had to think about our production volume and how much we can keep up. Honestly, right now, the entire brewery is shut down and furloughed. We're not producing more. And some of that, at this point, I think that'll end here the next week and we'll be able to start producing again. But in the lead up to kind of trying to gauge what was going to happen, we quickly moved everything that we usually would go into draft format that would go out to bars and restaurants and started canning everything. And my team worked incredibly hard for those last few weeks to get things into a sellable format that because draft sales, they just 100% don't exist right now. And that's like a national across the board because, you can't go to bars. So we quickly pivoted to getting everything in cans and then had quite a large inventory. And so rather than have our brew team sit around and not have anything to do, and we wanted to furlough them, make sure that they could get in line for the stimulus package, and then slowly decipher what the PPP meant and how we could continue operations, which we're working on diligently on right now. Which I'm sure, you've talked to a lot of different folks. It's everybody has a different answer every day, and even with Congress. So it's ever developing.
It is ever developing. It's been a tough setup for independent restaurants as it is. I'm hopeful this stuff is fluid and will change. It's challenging to take money that you have to spend in 2 months and 75% on payroll when you're not even open. But I think that, hopefully that'll change. And, you have to hope for the best with that. Well, I think the demographics of a lot of these chains that you may not have typically thought of have changed a little bit too. I mean, there's people that are trying to, limit the number of places they go to. So they go somewhere that's got all kinds of stuff because they don't want to go here to get this and there to get that. I mean, we're in that boat. My family, for sure. We've changed a lot of things about the way we procure what we need for the house. So, well, one more thing, and I'll let you go. Although I could literally talk to you for hours, I could tell, Patrick, and I can't wait to actually sit down and have a beer with you one day. Tell me about your your team? How's everybody holding up right now?
They're good. I'm staying in touch with them as much as possible. And that includes, even with Mondo, which, I glowingly call our sister restaurant, but I have no ownership in, but everybody that works there I consider family too. We have a lot of employees between the two spaces, over 200. So it's definitely been an emotional roller coaster to have to sit down with all of them and explain the situation. But fortunately, we've been able to do a lot to have like weekly family meals that they stop by and pick up. We get a chance to see them from a distance, and but just touch base and make sure everybody's doing well. And I think at the end of the day, our staff is just phenomenal and really knows that our goal is to make sure that they have a job to come back to. And that's everything we're doing right now, is to make sure that is a reality. And a lot of that played into, I think a lot of folks are confused why we wouldn't do curbside pickup or delivery. And most of that has to do with the complexity of the cuisine we make and how many people we'd need in the building to get it done properly and then get it out to folks. And I know a lot of really great restaurants have figured that out. And we did do it for a trial run of it and realized, okay, we could work out a lot of these kinks and figure it out and make sure it's as safe as possible. But then we really kind of had a gut check with our team and just decided that I think it was in the best interest of the safety of our staff and the community at large to hold off on it and wait till things get better and then reevaluate. Because, for better or worse, we just had a lot of people that showed up that day that wanted Bhavana, which was flattering, but it also just there's a business owner aspect of it, but then there's also the community as a whole that we had to think about. So it just didn't make sense for us. And I know a lot of folks out there that are doing it really well, very efficiently and very safely, just for our style of food. And it just wasn't possible. All that is to say that our staff is doing well. And the brew team is, who I have constant connection with. And I think they're all anxious to get back making beer, because it's what they all love to do as well. So I think hopefully we'll see this through pretty soon, but we'll come back probably with a vengeance with a lot of creativity.
Well, yeah, it's certainly, you already had a lot of that, you and Van Bisa and everybody there. You'll come back with even more, because it's forcing us all to be really thoughtful right now. And frankly, we have a lot of time to collect our thoughts and be creative. Well, listen, Patrick, I'll let you roll. I know that nap time may not be too long. You probably got other stuff to do before daddy duty takes over again. So thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it. Thanks for the business. Thanks for all that y'all do, the way you do it. And we really appreciate the opportunity to have you on here, man. And I just thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I've enjoyed it. It was a good break from watching Toy Story. But yeah, no, I appreciate it, Will, and we'll hopefully get to share a beer soon.
All right, my friend. We'll talk soon. Thanks, Patrick.
Yep.
All right, Bye. Take care. Bye.